Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered, the podcast that takes the mystery out of commercial real estate and makes it accessible for everyone. I'm Caleb David, a broker, investor, and community builder with over a decade of experience helping businesses and individuals bring their visions to life. Here we break down the market, share expert insights, and talk about the opportunities that commercial real estate creates for businesses and communities alike. No fluff, no gatekeeping, just real, unfiltered conversations that empower you to navigate the space with confidence. So whether you're an investor, a business owner, or simply curious about commercial real estate, welcome. Let's dive in. Everyone, welcome to the first episode of Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. I'm your host, Caleb David, and I am just absolutely excited for my first guest. It's kind of a real full circle moment for me, meeting back up with Greg in this format about 7-8 years ago. Greg started his podcast, Real Estate Titans, and I had the opportunity. That was my first ever podcast experience. And here we are. I get to have Greg on as my guest. And so a little bit more information about Greg is that Greg Fowler is a leading expert in digital marketing for real estate professionals and the founder of Lion Bolt Media. It's a company that specializes in high conversion marketing strategies. With over 20 years of experience of sales and digital marketing, Greg has educated thousands of real estate professionals on brand building, lead generation, content marketing, and automation. That's thousands. So he's someone you want to listen to. And as the host of the Real Estate Titans podcast, creator of the Digital Lightning Master Course, and a moderator for Lab Code Agents, Greg is dedicated to helping real estate professionals scale their businesses through innovative marketing and digital prospecting. This is something you're going to want to hear. His expertise in organic and paid marketing strategies, CRM automation, and conversion funnels positions him as a must-hear voice in the commercial real estate space. Greg, welcome to the show.
Oh, Caleb, hey, thanks for having me, my friend. And again, that was quite the intro. So hopefully I'll be living up to that. I do want to jump in to your earlier thought, Caleb. And yeah, the full circle moment. I had to look back because we've known each other for years. And, we've had so many beautiful conversations, just again, privately. And so it's so nice to be able to share that with your audience. Yeah. But I looked back, episode 19 of Real Estate Titans, that was yours. So any of your audience who wants to go back, and I looked at the exact date, Caleb, too, because I had to check, because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. It was May 4th, 2018. So it was 6 years ago.
Wow.
Is when you were on Real Estate Titans. And what an incredible episode. So again, if your audience wants a past look of Caleb David, go take a look at that all day long.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has happened in 6 years, for both of us. And, I'm going to go back and re-listen to that episode myself and see how much I've learned and grown since then.
Love it. But it's an honor to be here, Caleb. Thank you so much for the opportunity. For sure, I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, you and I have worked some together in the past about building my brand and my online presence. And it was absolutely massive for what I needed in my business. So talk to me a little bit more about brand building, and what is the importance for, a commercial real estate broker or someone who's in the industry to really kind of dial that in. Why is branding so important?
Oh, Caleb, and you're speaking my language here. I appreciate the kind words of us working together. And, when we talk about anything marketing in digital space and a brand, I just light up, So for me, this is my passion language all day long. And anybody who's tuning into this in the commercial space, they got to realize that the brand is everything. And anybody who's been in business, whether you're an entrepreneur, understands the power of a brand that has mind share, capturing the mind space of your potential client, your end user. And the ones that have the deepest, most compelling brands, they're the ones that stick out top of mind when somebody is ready to transact in any form or fashion. And unfortunately, there are some amazing practitioners in so many different fields and space. And obviously, we specialize in real estate with professionals, so we know that like the back of our hand. But there's so many great professionals that just don't have enough at-bats, enough opportunities to have meaningful, connected conversations, because quite frankly, their end user, their ideal client, doesn't even know they exist.
Yeah.
So the importance of having a brand that's authentic and then taking that brand and injecting it to your end user that you're looking to transact with and connect with is everything. It's the lifeblood of the business. So I'm a big fan of this conversation. So anywhere you want to go with that, Caleb, I'm all day
Absolutely.
for it, for
Well,
building the
something
brand.
that stood out to me is you saying the word, the brand is done authentically. And I
Mhm.
think that is something that in the world that we live in, it's flashy, it's all these ads, I want to get myself on television or on a podcast or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, what we bring to the table is ourselves. And
Yes.
so, how would you talk to somebody who's kind of struggling with their branding and not wanting to have, what is it, feel like a poser, right? Like an imposter syndrome. So how do you kind of walk somebody through, getting through that imposter syndrome and help them discover what that should look like?
Caleb, I appreciate, and as you mentioned, the discovery process is everything. When you look at it from a true nature, the closest that we can be to our actual self walking around on this planet, the better we're going to be online and the more we're going to connect with the end user. There's so much positioning and posturing to walk like a duck, talk like a duck, especially into the commercial real estate space. I mean, when you see that, there's a thought in a mind where you can paint a picture of a commercial broker,
Yes.
and it isn't the most exciting, and it isn't the most awe-inspiring and or connected to the end user in and of itself. It's kind of a vanilla world. And in any opportunity, the ones that stand out into a positive are the ones that are really looking at it to say, who am I? So starting from there is to say, who am I? Where am I from? Why am I doing this? And who am I trying to impact and serve? That's really the starting point for anybody. Whether you're brand new into the business or you're a seasoned pro, everyone should be asking themselves these questions. I like to do the origin story exercise with this and really just kind of break that down. If you didn't know yourself and you were introducing yourself for the first time, what are the milestones? What are the main components that make us unique, who we are, the decisions that we made, the past examples that we have? Because the more personal we can get with that, the more emotional connection we have to somebody who's consuming it. And here's the best example that I can give of this, Caleb, and this is going to shock a few of your audience members here. If you were to look at it from a digitized sense, look yourself up online right now, and from what you see, because that's the majority of the population of their first impression is your digital space,
Yeah.
would you hire you?
Yeah.
Would you connect with the story that you're telling? And
Yes.
if the answer is no, you got work to do. I mean, if the answer is yes, okay, but there's still improvement.
Yeah.
So I always start with the origin story and kind of work your way out, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense because I think we aren't our stories, but our stories affect how we present ourselves in this world and it speaks to the experience that we've had.
Mhm.
And I think something that you said is that I don't think that we're ever, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that our branding is ever fully done. I
Well
feel
said.
like, would you agree that it's something that's an ongoing process as we evaluate? And I love what you said about examining the story that we're telling to other people, but then also, who am I? And I think
Mhm.
that takes some vulnerability and some introspection and some work. And I think sometimes we need people around us to help guide us and prod us in the right direction. So, what would you say is one of the most important things that when someone is looking for their brand, obviously it's their origin story. Do they need to take into consideration their target audience? What are some
Mhm.
other things that someone should be thinking about? And we don't want to overwhelm people here. We want to provide some practical steps
Yeah.
and for there to be an after action, where they reach out to you or they reach out to me,
Yeah.
and we're able to help people along in their journeys. Not that
Mhm.
we've arrived, but maybe speak a little bit more to some other factors like target audience that people should be thinking about.
Caleb, you took the words right out of my mouth. And I promise everybody who's listening, this is not scripted. Caleb and I didn't have a pre-conversation about where this was going. This is all organic, which I love. And when you mention that, Caleb, again, everybody's looking at it for starting from their base point, right? Their ground level and building the foundation of their brand. I don't like to go to the target audience before that And the
Yeah.
reason being is because that can kind of skew your thoughts as to your true representation. When you start to take into account the audience and or outside guests that are into our brand and our world, it can shape and morph. I don't want to do that right off the bat. So understand who you are and why you do what you do and what your journey, your origin story is first. That's fundamental. Now, you can look outward. So, to give your audience action items to do so, some people are like, well, hey, I don't know how to present myself or my brand, right? So many people think that a brand is just a beautiful logo, some color swatch selections, and a tagline or a slogan, a beautiful website, maybe. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Start it from the ground up, which a brand is just like your reputation.
Mm.
It is the emotional connection that you have with a person. And take this to consideration. If you have a powerful brand, like we discussed, it's what people are thinking and saying about you when you're not around.
Yeah.
That's a brand. Now, you could have a good brand or a bad brand. You could have a good reputation or a bad reputation, but it's got to start there.
Yeah.
And if it's effective, transactions will come about. And if it's not, they won't. So I think that's starting. Now, secondarily to the target audience, once you understand that and you craft it, you can look to others for example. So, yes, a lot of times you can use market research for guidance, but it's just guidance. You do not want to be a carbon copy. Look, if I'm in the commercial space and I see somebody like Caleb David, amazing at what he does, and I say, I'm going to be just like him, you're always going to be a second rate version of Caleb David. You will never be a better version of him ever. So the idea is to look at somebody like Caleb. How does he speak? How does he position himself? What are the things that he does digitized that connect and resonate with you? Now, if you find a few of those examples, that can help you build your brand and craft your own version, your own true, authentic message. Don't feel like you got to do it alone. The nice thing is when you identify a few examples, follow them on social media, subscribe to their channels, opt into their newsletters because you have their verbiage and their brand and their message coming to you, and that can help you in the future. So let's get into the next chapter of that, Caleb. So that was a roundabout way of answering.
Yeah. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, I love this process because that is everything. It sets the tone. But once you really identify that and your brand and your message, then you say to yourself, well, who am I trying to bring into my world? To your point, what is your target audience? As I like to consider your avatar, your client avatar. I use this as an example because I'm a nerd and I love movies. You know, I'm a product of the 80s. So there is depending on who you talk to, a great film or maybe a not so great film. I'll leave that up to your audience to debate, maybe in the comments below or wherever this is going. They can say if they like it or not. But there's a film back in the 80s called Weird Science. And there's two young guys, Gary and Wyatt. And again, it's just a silly science fiction film, but this is an example here. So Gary and Wyatt are trying to build the perfect girl on a computer. That's how silly this is, right? So they're describing all the details, right? Down to the finest of details. All of a sudden, lightning strikes the house. It hits the computer, it blows up, and Lisa appears. This perfect girl that Gary and Wyatt created. Now, let's take this to the reality of commercial real estate. When you're going through this exercise of building your ideal client avatar, you want to get it down to the finest of details. Imagine to yourself that you were able to describe this perfect client that you would transact with right now. If you were to snap your fingers and they would appear right in front of you, who would that be? Yeah. So it's not just enough to know age range, demographics, geographics. Think about that ideal client and their milestones. Right? Where are they in their life? What are they trying to accomplish with their businesses? What are their needs, wants, and desires? How are you able to get them from their current situation to desired situation? The more granular details you give, the better it is because at the end of the day, now you have a clear path and picture of who you're speaking to. Yeah. And ultimately, you can say, now I've got my brand, and now I know exactly who I'm speaking to. How do I combine the two? Yeah. To make sure that my content and my digital presence and my physical being connects all the way through. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. And it brings up another thought as you're talking about this. I tell our team all the time, all we've got is our time, our expertise, and our reputation. And
Mm.
I love the thought of branding being equated to reputation. But another thought that came to my mind was what I hear you saying, at least this is my perception of it,
Mhm.
is that we have to have aligned values with our target audience.
Yes.
How important is identifying personal values in the process?
It's huge. It's everything. And there's so many professionals, entrepreneurs of any kind, but right, we're sticking to commercial real estate here into this process, that they would say, hey, look, I transact with anybody,
Mm,
right? Like anybody that comes in my way that's living, breathing, and I can help them with my product or service, I'll transact with anybody. And it's not to say that we're trying to shun or put out individuals into our lives. That's not it at all. But in a perfect world, which we can formulate and create, we want to have messaging that connects with the ideal person. Now, if you've been in the business for a while, you can look back at your past clients and say, who did I really connect with and enjoy working with? How do I get more of them? Because there's some clients that we do because transaction is the transaction. And there's some clients that are like, that was an awesome transaction, and I'm going to have a beer with you later on.
yeah,
And so if you had the ability and capability, which you do with your marketing and your message and your brand, to attract those individuals, not chase.
yeah,
And it's all down to your message. Light attracts light, Caleb, is what I always say into this standpoint. And good branding and marketing initiatives, they equally attract and repel simultaneously. And the reason why this is important is because, look, if you don't appreciate who I am and what I bring to the table as a professional and as a person,
yes,
that's not the person that's my tribe, my family, my client. They're not going to refer me business. That's somebody that I'm not going to enjoy. And quite frankly, they're probably not going to enjoy it either. I would rather see themselves out beforehand every day of the week. It saves you time, it saves them time. The ones that do come in, it's a done deal.
right.
That we've connected in so many different ways, and it's extremely powerful the more you do this, and it compounds. It just absolutely does. So yeah, hopefully that explained the process
Absolutely.
into that.
And I would say, since I started making those changes and saying no to certain clients that did not align with my values, as difficult as that is, like
Mhm.
light attracts light. And I think your energy changes. And when you make the decision that is right for you, that aligns with your values, another door opens. And, I firmly believe that. And, I think part of that process too is, again, translating who we are, the
Mhm.
inner work that we're doing to make sure we're presenting our authentic self. Then we have to do the action pieces, right? Do that. And I never heard these words before you, is that checking out your digital footprint. And you alluded to that earlier. So how do we get from that initial editing of our, or receiving and seeing what our digital footprint actually is,
Mm.
to creating that into more full content, marketing strategies, and so forth?
I love this, Caleb, and that's a perfect transition to kind of the next step. So, if you build your brand, understand, then you know your avatar or avatars, right? Because clarifying that, somebody might listening to your audience saying, well, I have a few different personalities. I have a few different individual styles of people that I want to work with and attract. That's fine. Do the same client avatar exercise with each of those individuals, right? You could have two, three, four, five different variations, but you need to know them deeply because that's going to help impact everything that we're talking about now, which is your digital first impression. So every exercise that you just accomplished with building your brand and your avatars now needs to make sure that it translates online. So the earlier comment that I made about Googling yourself and seeing what's there, right? There's going to be really three main options that kind of stick out. First thing, you look yourself, your business, your brand, whatever the case may be, you don't exist. Well, to the majority of the population, you also do not exist. It's
Yeah.
not the best first impression that you want. It's not instilling somebody to say, hey, wow, that's somebody I'm aligning with. That's somebody that I'm entrusting into this transaction here, right? Secondarily, as you show up, but not in the best foot forward sort of scenario. You might have halfway done sites. I might not have contact information. They might be stale or static pieces of content or none that's there. It's not showing shining recommendations and social proof. It's not necessarily giving me your best version of yourself. Third, which is what you really want to show up as, is taking the brand that you've built and the avatar or avatars and making sure that it is injected everywhere digitally that somebody could find you, right? So your main websites, landing pages, social media platforms, right? Is it easy to connect and communicate with you in various forms for your avatar, right? So when you painted that picture, where are they spending their time? What sites do they research things on? What do they find credible? Make sure you show up, but you show up the way that you want to make sure people see you. And
Mhm.
I use this equation as Googling yourself or doing a digital first impression is like your physical first impression. When you're meeting with a client for the very first time, either at your office or it ends up being at a neutral zone, like a coffee shop or something along those lines, or maybe into the commercial space in and of itself, what are the first impressions? The way we walk, the way we talk, our body language, posture, the way that we are actually communicating in attentive details. People are making snap judgments within moments. And that's a physical first impression. You only got one. Well, trust me when I tell you, your digital first impression is to the majority of the population, no matter how big your brand is, no matter how long you've been doing this, crucially important that you show up the right way, authentically to you. So there's no disconnect. The Caleb that I know and meet physically every day, face to face, is the same Caleb that I see everywhere online. There's no difference. You don't have to walk on eggshells. You don't have to be one way with someone and another with another. The imposter syndrome, as you mentioned, there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, just be you. Make sure that it translates equally. So, how you actually do this online to any of the audience out here, Caleb, is Google yourself. 3 layers of the Google search. It's the easiest thing to do. Now, yes, it's no disrespect to Yahoo or Bing, but Google is king when it comes to search. Google and YouTube are one and the same. So there's going to be a lot of, connectivity for search engine optimization there. But to keep it simple, first and foremost, Google your first and last name. Now, Google your first and last name, how you actually introduce yourself. So I'll give you an example. I'm a Gregory, but I go by Greg.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to type in Gregory. I'm going to type in Greg. So whatever you have on business cards or on your websites or however you introduce yourself, make sure that your search is connected to that. You're already going to have a geo target to your current location based off of your web browser. So not to be too nerdy, but wherever you live in this world, Google is going to have your IP address and they're going to know where you're at and they're going to curate searches based off your location. There are some local, regional, national, international searches. Don't get wrapped up in those details. Type your first and last name in, see what shows up.
Yeah.
Now, some people, they might be all over page 1. And that's all that really matters. No one goes to page 2, page 3, and so on. Page 1 is everything. Now, if you don't show up under your name, go to the second layer, which is your first and last name and your occupation. What your title is for your particular occupation, right? Commercial broker, for an example. First and last name, commercial broker. See what pops up, right? These are layers that people are going to go down. Last layer and third and final is first and last name, occupation, and geographic location. So, for example, because I know you're out of the Springs or Colorado, I should say. So your town, your city, or your state. So first and last name, your occupation, and your geographic location. And those are your 3 layers of your search. No one's going to go deeper than that.
Yeah.
No one's going to be hunting for you. If I can't find you on one of those 3 layers, you're in terrible zone. That's how I base it. Once you go through that process, Caleb, then, and I would encourage everybody to do this. It takes you no time at all. Make a list of the sites that populate for you and have a cheat sheet. Okay, is it a main website? Is it a brokerage sort of provided website, or is it a personal site that you built yourself? What social media platforms pop up for you? Make a list, right?
Yeah.
And then what you want to do is look into Google Images, see what pops up visually, also see what shows up video format for YouTube because they're one and the same. If you have sites, make sure that you go in and update them.
Yeah.
So update everything that you already built, right? So if you understand your brand and your message and your ideal client, is it authentic? Does it translate? And is it updated, right? Too many times I see old photos or photos that don't evoke the emotion of who you are and what you're representing. Same thing with websites, landing pages, bios, contact information, the different media that's getting put out there. This exercise, everyone should do at least once a year. Just pull up your search, see what populates. You will have dramatic changes just by doing this. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't need a nerd to help you with this. If you literally just do what I just told you, you will have increased organic search engine optimization. You will show up better when somebody's looking for you, your brand, product, or service. You don't have to pay for a thing. So hopefully that helped with the digital
No,
footprint.
absolutely. And I think it's that practicality of here's something that you can do right now. And guess what? It doesn't take very long,
Mm-mm.
but I think taking that external digital footprint inventory, just like you've done internally, and if
Mhm.
they don't match, then we've got some work to do.
Yeah.
And I think it can be, I know at least for me, you and I joke all the time about how I'm not good with tech and online stuff and all that. And so I had your help to walk me through a lot of those things and give direction. So I want my listeners to hear that this is what Greg does. So if you start feeling like your head's swirling a little bit, just take a deep breath, have a drink of water, and call Greg.
Uh,
Walk you through this. And so now that we've taken inventory, right, of what our digital footprint is, then
mhm.
how do we start attracting people? How do we, obviously there's steps and action to be taken. And that's where I sometimes get a little bit just paralyzed, you know?
Sure.
So how do we start with that distribution?
And Caleb, I appreciate that and the warm, intro out to the audience as well. I'm happy to help for sure, but I always want to help and empower people to do things and learn things on their own. I mean, if you need additional and guiding lights or support, like I'm always here, but there's so many things that we can do on our own that are very cost effective and time effective that are going to yield a return on our investment and time. That's the number one commodity is our time. And so many of your listeners might be saying, hey, this sounds great, but what's in it for me? What's in it for you is that you show up to the people that you want to bring into your world again and again to have more opportunities, more at bats, right? Now, if you already have an established business and brand, this is going to continue to amplify that, right? So you're not hurting yourself by doing these exercises. What you are doing is if you don't, you're going to become that secret, right? You don't want to be the best kept secret in the commercial space, right? You want everyone to know that you're an option and an opportunity. So to get to your next question is how do we kind of take this and translate it so that we can amplify and distribute this, right? So I tell everybody, because everybody who reaches out, they're like, hey, I just want to go into video initiatives. I want to start a podcast. I want to be everywhere, omnipresent. I want to touch everybody in multitudes so that I can do more transactions. You have to start where we spoke, the brand, the avatar, and your digital footprint first. That's the foundation of your entire business digitally. So then you go and you say, all right, well, if I'm that avatar or those avatars, and I put myself truly in their shoes with knowing their needs, wants, desires, current situation, where they're trying to go, how can I create content that provides value and serves them? So if you were them, this is the big content thing. If you were those individuals you're looking to attract and add value, emotional currency into the bank with,
Yeah.
is that a piece of content that you would be excited to see on whatever platform? Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn. It doesn't matter if it ends up being a blog or a newsletter. Put yourself in the end user's shoes. Is this something that if I watched or read, it would make my life better? Would it impact me in a positive? Would I want to keep coming back for more? If the answer is yes, you're on the right track. If the answer is no, follow others that are already doing this at a high level. Getting their information. I said subscribe, opt into their newsletters. What you'll do is you'll see from a bigger scale and scope. And this doesn't have to be in your local, hyper local geographic area. Look to the top commercial brokers in the space that are doing it at a high level, that are putting up transactions that you enjoy their brand and their message on these platforms. That's going to give you all the information that you need. So when you talk about creating content, understand your audience, understand where they are and the platforms that they're on, and then create content that's going to best serve them in the way that they're consuming it. Now, I'm a big video nut. I think that's the closest thing. Like you and I right here, Caleb, we're more than 2,000 miles away as we're shooting this, but I'm right with you.
Yeah.
The closest thing besides being face to face, side by side, is video. So creating video content that can be consumed by your audience that provides value, interest, entertainment, knowledge, however you want to base it off of, that's going to better their lives, keeping you top of mind, gathering that mind share and that mind space of that ideal is key and crucial. So that's where I would start. I mean, and now some people are like, "Oh, I'm not comfortable on video. I don't like the way I look, the way I sound. I don't even know what to say." These are barriers of entry that we put on ourselves. And the way that I describe this is, look, you weren't born knowing how to drive,
Yeah.
right? You had to learn, you had to get behind the wheel. You had to maybe bump into some stuff, hopefully you had somebody that was kind with you and take driving lessons, whatever. You had to get your license. So again, at some point, you just have to get behind the wheel. You just have to take the first step to that, journey of your life in content creation and distribution. And why this matters is remember what you're trying to do this for. You're trying to provide value and serve your audience to bring the right people into your life so that you can help them and help yourself simultaneously. And again, this is all about exposure. This is connectivity and emotional. So for me, if you're concerned about shooting video, you just got to get over it. You just got to start shooting, start doing it. And furthermore, Caleb, and I'll pause. My apologies. I'm just like,
No,
wow,
this is great information.
but for me, it's what you're shooting on video format. That's what your client sees. That's what your client hears. And so all of our own insecurities, and I get it, like we all have them. I'm not a fan of shooting videos myself. Like people say this all the time, like, oh, you must love it. You must be on. I don't. I don't enjoy being on stage. I don't enjoy being on podcasts. I don't enjoy shooting my own videos. I understand the power behind them and the impact that I'm able to have on the communities that I serve because I'm stepping out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So if you can't get over that, there's nothing that we can do here. That's a you thing. But I will tell you, the ones that do are the ones that are taking the majority of the mind share and the opportunity for future business, not just now, but into the future. So hopefully that helped, Caleb.
That's very helpful. And I think because, in the commercial real estate space, brokers aren't that active on social media compared to the residential side of things,
Oh,
right?
for sure. For
And,
sure.
and I think one easy way to get started, because I'm kind of in that place too, is let's get started, let's do something. And that can just start with a simple Instagram story. You've already got somewhat of a warm audience, right? And hopefully the idea is to attract some new followers and things like that. But that's a great, what better place to practice than with people that already follow you and care and love you, and you can do that, share it there and at Facebook at the same time. So you're hitting two different audiences. So this isn't as overwhelming as people might think. It's an easy starting point. And guess what? After a little while, the story goes away, right? But then you
Yes.
can also watch and engage. What are people really connecting? What videos are they connecting with you on? I
Mhm.
find when I do a video about me cooking something, I tend to get more views there than if I'm talking about something real estate. But little by little, that transition happens, right? Because what we want to do is educate people and help them get further on in their goals and their dreams.
You touched on something that's super powerful for everybody out there, and we kind of glazed over it for time purposes, but I want to go back to the brand itself because when people are identifying kind of who they are, it's a personal and a professional journey. And you had mentioned cooking, and obviously that's a passion. You're a foodie, as am I. And I think looking at it from that standpoint, people are more likely to find and understand and be excited about personal notes to you and to your life and your interests more so than anything business related, period. And the best example that I always give to this is the differences between business brands themselves and personal brands. And if you look at the biggest corporations on the planet, right? And let's just say Apple, for instance, right? Like look at Apple's following on Instagram and look at Tim Cook's following,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Tim Cook has a much larger following than Apple does. If
Yeah.
you look at Virgin, right? And then you look at Richard Branson. If you end up looking at Elon Musk and Tesla, the emotional connection to the person in and of itself is crucially important. But what happens is that attracts the majority of the attention is the personal notes and the person behind it
Yeah.
that funnels to the brand and the business in and of itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen the other way around.
Right.
So what I say to everybody is when you're breaking down your brand and your journey, you need to add into the equation, especially when you're creating content, passions of yours that are outside of the business space. Now, why that's doing, it's going to spice up your content stack and it's going to show personal sides to you that people can connect with. Now, it's not all like Caleb, the foodie sort of scenario. And if that's 90% of the time, it's like, wow, I love Caleb about this, but what does he do for a living again?
Yeah.
You need to have a balance into that. So, but what it does is it gives people a more dimensional and dynamic variation of who you are because we're not one dimensional
Right.
in life. So
Correct.
don't show that way online. Remember, whatever you are and whoever you are physically, you need to translate that equally. If I'm looking at myself online, is that the person that I believe that I am, that I'm showing up every day? If the answer is no, like, what are you missing? And I'm not saying share everything personal and air everything out and be the complete most open book on the planet. But the more you're able to let out and connect, the more opportunities you're going to have to do so.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's crucially important when you're talking about content creation. For me, I think that's crucially important. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Caleb.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, I feel like I could talk to you for another hour, but I think we might have to do another episode later on down the road. So one of the questions, I actually got this question from someone I was on a podcast with, and he gave me permission, Steve Ramona. He's been somewhat of a mentor to me as I embarking on this new podcast situation. But one of the questions he asked me at the end of our podcast, I want to ask you the same question, is, okay, you are at a restaurant, there's a table of four. You've got one seat, you've got three other seats.
Ooh.
If you could have anybody dead or alive with you at that table, who are they and what are you eating?
Oh, wow. I love this question. So I have three people. First, it would be like just right off the top of my head, it would be my grandfather on my mother's side. Reason being is because I've never met him. Unfortunately, he was murdered. Not to go into a dark realm, I'm Colombian descent. So my grandfather was a judge, and there's a lot of things that happened during that time frame through the cartels, and he was a an honest man. And unfortunately, his tea was poisoned, and that was that. So I was never able to meet my grandfather. So I would love to see him and meet him and have conversation. I mean, I don't speak a lick of Spanish, which is horrible, but I would love to just be with him. And if somehow I could understand him, if there's a caveat to this meal, I would love to be able to speak with him. So my grandfather would be one of them. I think I would also love to meet and have a conversation with Frank Sinatra.
Mm.
I'm just a fan of his music, and I would love to just understand his journey from his perspective and really just kind of conversate with that man and hear that voice in the flesh. I think that would be super cool. And then one more, I think I would want to. Hmm. I think that this is an interesting thing, but my brother Sean is my best friend in the world, besides my wife. Like, she is my best friend, but I'm with my wife every day, and I'm very fortunate to be so. And I get to have lunches and dinners and breakfast with her. My brother Sean's in Dallas, so I only get to see him but a few times a year. So I would love to just be with him
Yeah,
more.
yeah,
So I
absolutely.
guess, hanging out with my brother, Frank Sinatra, and, looking at it from that perspective, I think that's a pretty cool list of individuals. And what would we be eating?
Yeah, what would be your dream to when you're sitting down with Frank, your brother and your grandfather? What looks good to you on the menu? What are you eating?
Man, I think, this is going to sound really sad, but one of my favorite meals is a properly executed pizza. And I know that just sounds like, well, it's pizza, like it's dough and sauce you know, but it's something that I pride myself on is every scenario that I can be and everywhere that I travel, I try to eat something new and exciting. It doesn't matter if it's a hole in the wall or a five-star Michelin sort of scenario, but I always find myself craving a good pie. And so I think I would love to share a good pie with those three guys. And yeah, that would be amazing. I don't know.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Greg, where can people find you? And how can
Yeah.
they online?
Love it. Appreciate that. Obviously take a look us up on Google. As I said, take out the digital first impression, type our name in, but you can go to, lineboltmedia.com, everything that we do and offer, and we love to help in any way that we can. Lots of free resources, stuff like that. You can find us on any social media platform. We're also there at Lionbolt Media or Greg Fowler CO. But yeah, I'd love to connect, chat, anything that I can help your audience with, Caleb. I'm there. Any resources, any tools, even just a kind word to chat about your brand, your business, I'm there for it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. We'll make sure all the links are in the notes. And Greg, thank you so much for this full circle moment.
Well,
And I look forward to many more conversations in the future.
likewise, Caleb. I appreciate you. Talk soon.
Talk soon.
That's a wrap on this episode of Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. I hope you found value in today's conversation and feel more confident about navigating the world of commercial real estate. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who could benefit from these insights. You can connect with me, Caleb David, and the team at David Commercial Real Estate. Just check the show notes for more information. Thanks for listening, and remember, creating space is more than just real estate. It's about building community. See you next time.